Welcome to a Legendarium special about Charles Dickens' other Christmas stories. In this installment, we will cover the 4 Christmas-themed follow-ups that Charles Dickens did to capitalize on his most famous success, A Christmas Carol. When one thinks of Charles Dickens and Christmas time, one's thoughts likely go to A Christmas Carol, the classic tale of miserly Ebenezer Scrooge and his Yuletide conversion. It proved an immediate success on its release about a week before Christmas 1843. The first print sold out in just 5 days, and the book continued to sell well into the following year. Despite that success, A Christmas Carol did not become the money spinner its author hoped. A deeply indebted Charles Dickens offered to cover the book's printing costs himself to make up for the poor reception of his novel Martin Chuzzlewit. However, Dickens' expensive cover and artwork meant that he only cleared a disappointing £230 from 6,000 copies sold. Nevertheless, A Christmas Carol proved popular enough with readers and reviewers alike for Dickens to attempt to repeat its success several more times throughout the 1840s. He published a new Christmas story almost every year until 1848. However, the 4 festive stories he published during this time, including both overlooked gems and outright flops, have since become eclipsed by their better-known predecessor. Today, these 4 Christmas stories remain among the least well-known of Dickens' vast catalog. In June 1844, 6 months after the publication of Christmas Carol, Dickens signed a new contract which required a Christmas-themed tale ready for publication that December. Dickens spent much of that year at an Italian villa, but away from London he failed to find inspiration. He later wrote to John Forster, "Never did I stagger so upon a threshold before. I seem as if I had plucked myself out of my proper soil when I left Devonshire Terrace, and could take root no more until I returned to it." One morning, while sitting on the terrace of his villa, Dickens lost himself in the sound of the church bells below. This inspired the Chimes, a Goblin story. It features an elderly messenger named Toby Veck, or Trotty. After a series of chance meetings with several other persons, ranging from a poor orphaned girl to a money-grubbing politician, Trotty learns that his beloved daughter Meg will get married to a man he does not care for. He begins to question whether people, especially poor men like himself, can better themselves at all despite occasional charity from the rich. Dismayed, he wanders off into the night after hearing the church bells call to him. Finding the local church open, Trotty climbs the bell tower and discovers that the spirits of the church bells have come to life, surrounded by their goblin attendants. They scold Veck for losing faith in humanity and tell him that he died during his climb and that now his ghost alone is in the church tower. They present him with a series of terrifying visions showing the future of his family and the characters he met that night, their lives ruined in part by his death. These climax with a terrifying vision of his daughter Meg thinking of suicide by throwing herself and her newborn child from a bridge. As he reaches out to save her, Trotty wakes to hear the bells of New Year's morning. Dickens leaves it up to the reader to decide if Trotty only had a dream or not. Dickens wrote what he believed the Chimes would eclipse A Christmas Carol. He even declared that he had knocked one out of the park. However, critics did not share Dickens' opinion of the Chimes and declared it inferior to A Christmas Carol. Nonetheless, the Chimes sold 20,000 copies in its first 3 months. In 1845, Dickens published another Christmas story, The Cricket on the Hearth. It tells the story of John Peerybingle and his young wife Dot. John Peerybingle is informed by a local miser named Tackleton that his wife is having an affair with a stranger. John, before separating from his wife, consults the family's guardian angel, a cricket always chirruping away on the household hearth. The cricket reveals that the man Dot embraced is in fact the family's son Edward, thought lost in South America. May, the girl condemned to marry the miserly Tackleton, is now free to marry Edward Peerybingle. During the festive cheer and celebrations that ensue, Tackleton's heart melts and he is a new man, much like Scrooge. And much like its predecessor, the cricket on the hearth became a huge success. In its time, many readers compared the cricket on the hearth to A Christmas Carol itself. However, critics did not warm to its schmaltzy and sentimental storyline. Dickens' rival and fellow author William Thackeray called it a good Christmas book, illuminated with extra gas, crammed with extra bonbons, French plums, and sweetnesses. However, the London Times wrote, "We owe it to literature to protest against this last production of Mr. Dickens." Both the chimes and the cricket on the hearth were derivative of A Christmas Carol, and many knew it, including Charles Dickens, who hoped to recapture the earlier success of A Christmas Carol. The fourth Christmas book would be written while Dickens was on holiday in Switzerland in 1846, and he called it The Battle of Life. It told the story of two sisters, Grace and Marian Jedler. Through a series of machinations and misunderstandings, Marian vanishes from her home village, having supposedly abandoned her fiancé Alfred for the libertine Michael Warden. In her absence, Alfred grows closer to and eventually marries Marian's sister Grace. The years pass and Marian suddenly returns. She reveals the real reason behind her disappearance was to allow her sister to fall in love with her fiancé, and the saintly Marian allows her sister to remain married to Alfred while she marries the redeemed Warden. This fourth book had little holiday cheer, with the only Christmas scene being an afterthought. Even Charles Dickens seems to have grown weary of his Christmas sequels and considered leaving The Battle of Life unfinished. By their reaction, critics also seem to have wished that Mr. Dickens left Battle of Life in the rubbish heap. They excoriated the unrealistic and underdeveloped plot and characters. Today, it is likely the least remembered and admired of Dickens' work, yet writing on the coattails of A Christmas Carol and The Cricket on the Hearth, the book sold a staggering 23,000 copies on its first day of release, nearly 4 times that of A Christmas Carol 3 years earlier. After a year off from the Christmas market, Dickens returned in 1848 with The Haunted Man, a tale that brought him back to the supernatural theme. In the story, a Mr. Redlaw, a gloomy chemistry professor tormented by the death of his sister, laments, "Another Christmas gone, another year gone, more figures in the lengthening sum of recollection that we work and work at to our torment, till death idly jumbles all together and rubs all out." He is visited by his own doppelganger late on Christmas Eve. He is given the gift of forgetting all the painful memories that have haunted him since his sister's passing. The catch is that anyone who meets Professor Redlaw is also made to forget their own painful memories. As the story progresses, Redlaw's influence ruins the lives of everyone around him, including making a dutiful son tending to his dying father forget his father, who dies alone and in misery. Much like Scrooge, Redlaw's realization that he is harming others leads him to turn over a new leaf, and it's happy endings for everybody. The Haunted Man sold an impressive 18,000 copies on its release in December 1848, though a sharp decline from The Battle of Life. Even Dickens' loyal fans began to weary, seeing Professor Redlaw is much less compelling than Ebenezer Scrooge. Charles Dickens, growing weary of Christmas stories and perhaps noticing declining sales, increasingly turned to social and political commentary in Bleak House, Hard Times, and A Tale of Two Cities. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.